This poem is called In Lieu of Flowers by Books. It was written to the prompt. Write a poem which takes as its subject a store, a shop, a place you used to love to go to that no longer exists. My very first thought was Old York Books in New Brunswick. From 1968 to 1983, it was a fixture of the intellectual life of the Rutgers community at 53 Easton Avenue, next to what became Thomas Sweet's ice cream shop. And then through gentrification, the owner, John Socha, was forced out of that building and found another place by luck and with help at 77 Church Street, down the bottom of Church Street. But of course, gentrification followed him there and ran him all the way out of town. In Lieu of Flowers by Books. In New Jersey, they teach addition by subtraction. Like when you want to add an upscale restaurant, first you subtract by raising a beloved old building, or raising the rent on a shop we the people can afford, and the cash-strapped undergrads and TAs at the local university. And if you want visitors to sit in your bars and micropubs, you remove public benches and make uncomfortable any other spaces where people might loiter freely. Which brings me to my unlikely hero, a Depression-era kid from Scranton, PA, who ran a secondhand store on Easton Ave, a block from the Rutgers College campus, and lost it, and lost another on Lower Church Street. If lost is the right word for expropriation, the exfoliating systematic scrub of capital. They say he had bad feet, and before the crash, when his teenage self shuffled out of town to ride the rails for day work, he found his lifelong love in the bookstores he visited on trips to the city to see specialists, when his hyphenated father, who read novels, to learn English better. They haven't recorded much more about John Socha's life, except that he retired from Sears and sank his savings into the inventory that became the stem cells of Old York Books. And he was never in it for the money. And more often than not, he erased the penciled price of poems you were pleased to purchase without haggling, said it was too much, and charged you $1 or $2 less, which probably drained any potential profit he might have made on the transaction. Because nothing for him was transactional. There's little left of him to note, but the last words of his obituary say all his loved ones really thought the world needed to know. In Lieu of Flowers, donations may be made to First Book, 1319 F Street Northwest, Washington, D.C. 20004, a national organization that distributes books to the poor. So, I think it's pretty straightforward, how I feel about that business and what happened to New Brunswick. I mean, I guess you can't stop change, right? But there was so much that you could do for so little money and have a good time in New Brunswick. And the one allusion to the benches, I used to write in a short space, especially, even after Old York moved to Church Street. Church Street, before it became gentrified, was an interesting block because you could pick up a book from Old York Books, a couple of dollars, maybe even less, maybe $1 something for a poetry chapbook. And you could take it over to J. August Cafe, which was at that time just a little counter behind the catalyst, in the back of the catalyst plant and gift store. You could also buy handmade paper, to write notes to your friends around the country, right? Before email, when you relied on snail mail. And you could sit at the counter and nurse a cup of coffee and a slice of fennel bread that they made in a coffee can, and slices were the size of the indentations on the coffee can. And you could sit there for a while, and then you could take that book and your notebook and sit and, meditate or read or write on the bench, on the sidewalk right outside the old church down the bottom of Church Street. And I was just looking at Google Maps, the street view, and I noticed the bench is gone. The whole block, I don't recognize it whatsoever. Right around at the time I'm talking about, I've got an article from the Home News, the New Brunswick Home News. They called it the Central Jersey Home News at that time. And it was called New Brunswick Installs Signs of the Times. And what they were doing was they were enforcing a sign ordinance to make all these businesses, look the way they wanted them to. And it talked about how Cheap Thrills, the great record store, they bought so many discount, cut out records, literally cut a hole in the corner of the album, and sold them for dirt cheap, right? And they talk about the construction code official, Michael Gupko, rigorously enforced the city's sign ordinances. The city has put a lot of money into the downtown area. It's time for some of the merchants to participate in that contribution by maintaining the exterior of the building. And what was their problem? They didn't like that the sign on Cheap Thrills Records was maybe too colorful, and they didn't like the psychedelic colors on it. And the Cheap Thrills owner painted over, and they didn't like the co-op, the food co-op. They had a pepper and tomato sign, and they danced along a sign that was too large for the store frontage. And the guy says, I have nothing against dancing tomatoes or peppers or corn or any other vegetable, but the overall length of the sign violated the ordinance. The ordinance provides that storefront signs cannot exceed 1 square foot in area for each 1 foot width of the building facade. And the problem was the co-op sign spanned 2 storefronts. Oh my God, this sign spanned 2 storefronts. Holy shit, right? And this is what was happening in New Brunswick. They were just taking everything nice and just trying to make everything sterile and shiny and so forth. But anything that reeked of being a little different, didn't fit their idea anymore. And then at the end, they talk about he said. Then they were going to move on to the French Street corridor. Now I don't know how well they succeeded over on the French Street corridor, to tell you the truth, because it doesn't look so great. Last few times I've driven through New Brunswick, but this was their idea, and I didn't like it, and a lot of us didn't like it. But who were we? Who were we to talk? We weren't making any money for them. We were just, enjoying, an intellectual experience that we could afford. So maybe we were the users, I don't know. But there you go. In lieu of flowers, buy books.